Unit 2, Subject Non-Compliant. Requesting K-9 backup at 1242 Maple Drive. The radio crackled. K-9. I floored it, the phone blasting every sound. HOA Karen Barbara listing fake violations, a weapon clicking free. That smug laugh of hers chilling me to the core. This is what happens when you ignore warnings, she said. Then a low growl rumbled through, a dog, closing in on Sarah. Fake cops, a snarling K-9, all over a vegetable garden. What the hell's going on? Who's behind this, and how does it end? Hit that subscribe button now, so you don't miss a single twist. Thank you so much for subscribing. The hospital's fluorescent lights were still buzzing in my head as I pulled into our driveway after a brutal 12-hour shift. All I wanted was to kick off my sneakers, grab a cold beer, and surprise Sarah by helping her with a new vegetable garden she'd been fussing over all week. The sun was dipping low, casting long shadows across our quiet street. Neat lawns, friendly porches, the kind of place where neighbors wave and mean it. We'd only been here 3 months, but it already felt like home. That is, until I saw it. A bright orange paper fluttering on our front door like a warning flag. I yanked it off the pin, holding it in place. My hands still shaky from the day. 2 emergencies and a kid with a broken arm will do that to you. The words hit me like a slap. Immediate action required, stamped in bold black letters across the top. My eyes scanned the rest. Unapproved landscaping modifications detected in backyard space. Immediate removal required. All garden installations must undergo proper HOA review process. At the bottom, a signature sprawled like it owned the page. Barbara Thompson, HOA President. And then the kicker. Security will conduct regular inspections to ensure compliance. Security? For a vegetable garden? I stood there, the paper crinkling in my grip, feeling like I'd stepped into someone else's bad dream. Sarah was inside, humming over a pot of soup, her fingernails still caked with fresh soil from the garden. She'd been out there all morning, planting tomatoes and peppers in neat little rows, proud as hell of the raised beds we'd built together. I handed her the notice, watching her smile fade as she read it. We checked the rules, she said, grabbing her tablet and pulling up the HOA website. Her voice was sharp now, the environmental lawyer in her waking up. Look, Article 7. Vegetable gardens permitted in backyards with proper drainage. We did everything right. Drainage, size, height, it's all perfect. She was right. We'd been meticulous, measured the beds, kept them low, even tucked them behind the fence so you could barely see the green tips from the street. So what was this? I snapped photos of the notice with my phone, front and back, something my dad, Chief of Police Anderson, had drilled into me growing up, document everything. The wording felt off, too formal, like it was trying to flex muscle it didn't have. I was about to say something when the doorbell jolted us both. Through the peephole, I saw her, Barbara Thompson herself, tapping her foot on our welcome mat like she owned it. She was clutching a tablet, her white pantsuit so crisp it practically glowed in the dusk. I opened the door, and she didn't even bother with a hello. I want to make sure you got my notice, she said, her voice clipped, eyes darting past me like she was casing the place. The boards had complaints about your agricultural activities. Complaints. I kept my tone even, channeling Dad's advice about staying cool under pressure. Can you show me those? And which rule did we break exactly? Her face tightened, just for a second, like I'd poked a nerve. Our new security team starts documenting violations tomorrow, she said, ignoring my questions. I suggest you comply fast to avoid complications. She turned to leave, but not before I caught a glimpse of her tablet case, a logo that looked eerily like a police badge. The door clicked shut, and Sarah was already on her laptop, pulling up property maps and HOA minutes. Look at this, she whispered, pointing to last month's meeting notes. No vote on any security team. Where's she getting this power? I stared out the kitchen window at Sarah's garden. Those tidy rows of green she'd poured her heart into. The orange notice sat on the counter like a ticking bomb. Something was wrong here, bigger than a few tomato plants. I reached for my phone and called Dad, then stopped. Maybe it was too early to pull him in. But as I watched Barbara stride down the street, snapping photos of other houses with that tablet, I couldn't shake the feeling that our little slice of peace was about to get ripped apart. And that orange paper? It was just the spark. The next morning, I was sipping coffee at the kitchen table, the steam curling up in lazy swirls when I saw them through the window. Two guys in black polo shirts, stamped with HOA security in blocky white letters, prowling around our backyard like they owned it. They weren't the usual clipboard-toting HOA busybodies. These guys moved with a purpose, snapping photos of Sarah's vegetable garden with quick, sharp clicks. Their tactical belts caught the sunlight, loaded with gear that looked way too serious for a neighborhood patrol. Sarah was still asleep upstairs, and I was glad for it. She didn't need to see this yet. I stepped onto the back porch, the boards creaking under my sneakers, and called out, "Can I help you, gentlemen?" My voice was steady, but my stomach was doing flips. The taller one turned, his hand resting on what looked like a real police taser, while his partner kept clicking away at the tomato plants like they were hiding evidence. "We've got police authority in this community," the tall one said, flashing a badge so fast I barely caught the shine before it vanished in his pocket. "Documenting violations under HOA Code 47B. Police authority?" I raised an eyebrow, pulling out my phone and hitting record. Dad's voice echoed in my head. "Always get proof. Mind showing me your credentials? And what's code 47B? The shorter guy froze mid-photo, his camera hovering over a pepper plant, and the tall one's jaw tightened. They didn't like that I was filming, I could tell. Their eyes flicked to each other like they were weighing their next move. Before they could answer, Barbara Thompson marched across our lawn, her designer workout gear screaming money, neon leggings, and a matching tank top that looked fresh off a boutique rack. She waved another orange notice like a battle flag. "These officers don't answer to residents," she snapped, her voice dripping with that smug edge I was starting to hate. "They report to the HOA executive board," meaning me. She planted herself between them, hands on her hips, like she was daring me to argue. I glanced past her, catching Mrs. Patel peeking through her curtains next door. Our eyes met for a split second, and I saw it. Fear, raw and real, before she ducked out of sight. That look stuck with me, prickling my skin. "Funny," I said, keeping my phone steady. "I don't remember the HOA voting on any security team. Where's this authority coming from?" Barbara's smile didn't budge, but her eyes narrowed. "It's all in the updated guidelines. You'll see enforcement soon enough." She turned to leave, the fake cops trailing her like shadows, but I'd already caught something on my footage. Their badges had no names, just a generic shield design that didn't match anything Dad had ever shown me growing up. And that gear? The way it sat on their belts looked off, like they'd thrown it together from a costume shop. Back inside, I replayed the video while Sarah stumbled downstairs, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Why are there men with guns snapping pics of our garden?" she asked, her voice tight as she peered out the window. I showed her the footage, and her face went pale. "Those aren't regular security guards," she said, leaning closer to the screen. "I worked at a security firm in college. Their gear's all wrong. No insignia, no proper holsters. This is fake." We watched through the blinds as the duo moved down the street, stopping at every house with the same cold precision. They lingered longer at the Rodriguez place, folks who'd griped about noise rules, and the Smiths who'd questioned a new security fee. By evening, I'd started a group chat with a few neighbors I trusted. The messages flooded in fast. These guys had barged into backyards, photographed kids playing, even threatened to detain Mr. Kowalski for washing his car. My phone buzzed again. "Barbara, texting from an unknown number. Your surveillance of our security team violates HOA policy. Expect enforcement tomorrow." "She's threatening us," I said, showing Sarah. Her eyes hardened as she pulled up state laws on impersonating cops. "If they're faking it, they're in deep," she whispered. "And if they're willing to pull this over a garden, what else are they hiding?" The kitchen table was already piling up with notes and screenshots. Outside, the garden sat quiet under the moonlight, those neat rows of green looking smaller, more vulnerable. Whatever Barbara was playing at, it wasn't just about vegetables anymore, it was a power grab, and we were smack in the middle of it. The day started normal enough, too normal like the quiet before a storm you can feel in your bones. I was at work, elbow deep in charts and patient files, when my phone buzzed hard against the desk. Sarah's name flashed on the screen, and my gut twisted. She never called during my shift unless it was bad. I ducked into the hall, hands already sweaty as I answered. "They're in our backyard," she whispered, her voice trembling. 3 of them. Jumped the fence while I was picking tomatoes. I could hear it through the phone. Gruff male voices barking orders, heavy boots thudding on our deck. "Ma'am, this is your final warning. Exit the garden now," one of them said, his tone trying for official but landing somewhere shaky. Sarah's breathing sped up. "We have authorization to remove you by force," he added. My heart slammed against my ribs. "Force? Over tomatoes? I'm not leaving my own property," Sarah shot back, firm despite the wobble in her voice. "Show me real police badges or get out." A radio crackled in the background, and then, Unit 2, subject non-compliant. Requesting K-9 backup at 1242 Maple Drive. K-9, I was already moving, shoving my phone on speaker as I bolted for the parking lot, tie flapping like a loose sail. "Sarah, I'm on my way. Call 911 now. These aren't cops." Before she could reply, Barbara's shrill voice cut through. "Mrs. Williams, your garden violates HOA aesthetic guidelines, section 4.3. My security team has full authority to remove unauthorized plantings and trespassers." "Trespassers?" Sarah's laugh was sharp, incredulous. "I live here, and those plants are in our yard." I heard the gate creak, the one I'd built last weekend, then boots crunching gravel, someone yanking at the beds. "Stop touching our property," Sarah yelled, her voice rising. "Look what I found," one of the goons said, smug as hell. Hispanic-style peppers. Definitely not approved vegetation. Sarah snapped back. "They're jalapenos. Since when do vegetables have ethnic restrictions?" I swerved through traffic, the phone blasting every sound, Barbara listing fake violations, a weapon clicking free from its holster, that smug laugh of hers chilling me to the core. "This is what happens when you ignore warnings," she said. "First the plants, then the stakes, now resisting security. You people need to learn respect." "You people." Sarah's tone went quiet, steely. I heard her phone camera click. "Say that again, Barbara." "I'm recording." A scramble of feet, Barbara's gasp, then, "Confiscate that phone. It's against HOA policy to record security." Sarah screamed, a short, sharp sound, and the phone clattered to the ground, still live. A low growl rumbled through the speaker, getting louder. A dog. They'd actually brought a damn K-9 unit for this. I floored it, weaving through cars, horns blaring as I pictured Sarah backed into a corner, those fake cops closing in. "Barbara Thompson," she shouted, "if that dog touches me, you'll be in handcuffs by sunset." Sirens wailed in the distance. Not from the precinct, though. 2 blocks out, I saw it. A black SUV with K-9 unit markings screeching into our street. My tires squealed as I hit the driveway, and the scene stopped me cold. Sarah was pressed against the front door, gardening gloves still on, dirt smudged on her cheek. 3 guys in tactical gear had her half-circled, one wrestling a German shepherd that was lunging against its leash, teeth flashing. Barbara stood off to the side, scribbling furiously on a clipboard like she was directing a play. "Step back inside your vehicle." One of them barked at me, hand on his belt. His badge glinted. Fake, I knew it from Dad's lessons, but that dog was real, and it was pissed. Barbara spotted me, her smile twisting. "Perfect timing. Your wife's interfering with HOA operations, 17 violations, including aggression toward my officers." I started recording, my phone steady despite the shake in my hands. "Funny," I said, "I've read the guidelines. No mention of private police or K-9 units." The youngest goon flinched, his hand dropping from his belt. Neighbors were gathering now, phones up, filming. The dog barked, sharp and loud, and Sarah jumped. I knew that sound haunted her. Her childhood dog bite still lingered in her nightmares. "Remove the vegetables now," Barbara snapped, "or we'll escalate." I stepped closer, pulling up the state police site. "Impersonating cops is a felony, Barbara. Those badges, that vest on the dog, each one's a charge." Her face flushed, but she kept writing, like her clipboard could save her. The sirens grew louder, real ones this time. I texted Dad, "Emergency. Fake cops, dog threatening Sarah. Help! Whatever Barbara thought she was running, it was about to crash hard. The air on our street buzzed with chaos as I stood in the driveway. Phone still recording, the German Shepherd's growls mixing with the hum of gathering neighbors. Sarah clung to the doorframe, her gardening gloves trembling but her jaw set tight. Barbara scribbled away on her clipboard, barking orders at her fake cops like she hadn't heard the sirens closing in. The three goons in tactical gear shifted uneasily, the youngest one tugging at the dog's leash as it whined and snapped. I could see sweat beading on his forehead. He knew they were in over their heads. Then it hit. Red and blue lights flooded the block, 5 patrol cars screeching in like a cavalry charge. Doors slammed, and there he was, Dad, stepping out of the lead cruiser in his full chief of police uniform, badge glinting in the afternoon sun. I'd never seen Barbara's face crumple so fast. Her smug grin melted into wide-eyed panic as she clocked the emblem on his door. The dog sat down hard, tail thumping, like it sensed real authority and didn't want any part of this mess anymore. "Barbara Thompson," Dad called out, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "Care to explain why you've got unauthorized personnel impersonating officers on private property?" He didn't yell, didn't need to. 20 years as chief gave him a weight that made the air feel heavier. Barbara waved her folder of papers, her voice pitching high. "We have all the HOA authorizations right here. These officers enforce our guidelines." Dad took the folder but didn't even glance at it. Instead, he pulled out his phone, scrolling to something with a calm that made her squirm. "Interesting," he said, turning the screen toward her. "State records show no licensed security company under your HOA's name. And that K-9 unit? No certified police dogs have been issued to private outfits in 2 years." The color drained from her face, leaving her looking like a ghost clutching a clipboard. He turned to the tallest fake cop, the one who'd flashed that badge at me. "That gear in your belt," Dad said, nodding at the taser. "Looks department issued. Mind telling me where you got it?" The guy froze, his hand twitching away from the weapon like it had burned him. No answer. Dad stepped over to their SUV, shining his flashlight through the window. "Well, what do we have here?" he called out. In the back seat, folders spilled open, photos of families in their yards, kids on swings, dinner tables through windows. My stomach churned. They've been watching us all. Barbara tried to bolt, edging toward her car, but a young officer blocked her path. "Ma'am, impersonating law enforcement's a federal offense," he said, calm but firm. "Using an untrained K-9 to threaten civilians? That's another charge." The dog, now confused, flopped onto the grass, panting like it was done with the whole charade. A real K-9 unit rolled up then, and the difference was night and day. Those dogs moved with precision, not chaos. Dad addressed the crowd, his voice steady. "If anyone's had run-ins with these individuals, we need statements." And shot up fast. Mrs. Rodriguez from next door stepped forward, her voice shaking but fierce. "They threatened to call social services on my kids for playing basketball." Mr. Patel joined her, holding up his phone. "They've been photographing my family for weeks, called our curry a nuisance." The stories poured out, each one a gut punch. Barbara sank into a patrol car, still gripping her rulebook like it could shield her. Her goons were cuffed, their fake badges and gear laid out on a cruiser hood like trophies. The German Shepherd got handed off to the real K-9 team, its tail wagging as they led it away. Sarah slipped over to Dad, wrapping him in a hug. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick. He nodded, but his eyes were hard as he flipped through those surveillance photos. "This isn't just about a garden," he muttered to me. "It's bigger." A news van screeched up at the street's end, camera rolling as neighbors spill their tales. Barbara saw through the car window and broke, tears streaming, but not the sorry kind. More like a kid caught with her hand in the cookie jar. I pulled Sarah close, feeling her relax for the first time all day. The fake cops were done, Barbara's empire was cracking, and the real law was here. But as Dad's officers collected evidence, photos, fake badges, that damn clipboard, I knew we'd only scratched the surface. Whatever she'd been building, it wasn't over yet. The morning after the arrests, our street felt different, like the air had finally cleared after a long, suffocating fog. I stood on the porch with a coffee, watching the sun creep up, painting the garden in soft gold. Sarah's tomato plants still stood, a little roughed up from yesterday's chaos, but stubborn as ever. The fake cops were gone, Barbara was in custody, and that German Shepherd was off to better hands. But the mess they'd left behind? That was just starting to unravel. Dad called me into the police station later that day, his office a war zone of papers. HOA financials, security contracts, stacks of photos. "This goes deeper than we thought," he said, sliding a bank statement my way. It showed $155,000 funneled monthly to Community Guardian Services, a name I'd never heard. The real HOA budget capped security at $2,000. "Where's the rest coming from?" I asked, my voice tight. He pointed to another sheet. Special assessment fees Barbara had slapped on families with violation notices. The Rodriguezes had shelled out $3,000 after a birthday party bust. The Patels got hit for maintenance on their garden. It was a racket, plain and simple. We dug deeper. The fake security team's leader, Mike Stevens, had no training, just a rap sheet for excessive force from 3 failed police gigs. That K-9, his pet dog, not a lick of certification, used to scare folks into line. My phone buzzed nonstop. Neighbors sending evidence. Ring footage of the team rifling through mailboxes, videos of threats over non-regulation grass height, written warnings from Barbara herself. Sarah texted me a clip from Mrs. Patel. Those goons calling her Curry a public nuisance. My blood boiled with every ping. By afternoon, Detective Martinez burst in, waving a training manual they'd found in the SUV. It was a playbook, how to target residents, when to snap photos, even scripts for intimidation. Barbara's handwriting scrawled in the margins. Focus on complainers first. This wasn't security. It was control, a power trip dressed up in badges. The investigation snowballed. Encrypted emails showed Barbara selling our routines to data brokers, pocketing cash while her goons cased houses. The HOA board was blindsided. They trusted her with the reins, signing blank checks she'd abused. Neighbors flooded the station with stories that night. The security team had demanded cash to overlook violations, threatened old Mrs. Patterson with eviction for her flower pots, followed kids home from school. Each tale hit harder, piling up on Dad's desk until midnight. Then we found her next move, a draft plan for cameras inside homes, ordered with HOA funds. She was building an empire, Dad said, rubbing his eyes. His phone rang. The FBI wanted in. Barbara's scam stretched across 3 states, preying on neighborhoods like ours. A week later, the community gathered on our lawn, trading evidence like war stories. Mrs. Patterson showed shaky photos of goons peering through her windows. The Rodriguezes had footage of their kids crying as that dog circled their bounce house. We weren't just angry, we were done. Sarah brought out lemonade, and the Rodriguez kids ran around, free for the first time in months. Someone started a group chat, and it lit up with plans, block parties, a real garden co-op, no more fear. Barbara pled guilty a month later, facing 15 years for fraud, theft, impersonation, the works. The news went national, sparking HOA crackdowns everywhere. Dad got calls from chiefs across the country, asking how we'd pulled it off. Sarah testified at the state capitol, her voice steady as she told her story, garden and all. The new HOA board ditched security for community. Our first act was a resident bill of rights, signed over a potluck in the community center. Spring rolled in, and the garden bloomed wild. Tomatoes, jalapenos, even Mrs. Patel's curry herbs swapped for Mrs. Patterson's tomatoes. Moving trucks hauled Barbara's stuff away one Monday, her lawn ornaments vanishing with the rain. Sarah, sporting a baby bump now, grinned as we watched from the porch. "Remember when we hid our coffee out here?" she said. I laughed. Yeah, a year ago, we'd have gotten a violation for loitering. Kids played in the street, no fake badges in sight. The ice cream truck's jingle replaced sirens, and the community center, once Barbara's security office, hummed with book swaps and coffee chats. A letter came from her daughter. Barbara was in therapy, gardening in a new town, maybe healing. I didn't care much. Our neighborhood had grown roots deeper than her schemes could ever touch. Dad was right. Real security's not in uniforms. It's in the people who've got your back. The sun dipped low, casting a warm glow over our garden. Tomatoes thriving, jalapenos popping red, a testament to what we'd fought for. Barbara's moving trucks faded down the street, her fake empire a memory. Kids laughed in the yards, neighbors swapped recipes, and the community center buzzed with life, not fear. We'd turned her tyranny into trust, her threats into roots that held us together. Sarah squeezed my hand, her baby bump a quiet promise of new beginnings. We did this, she whispered, and we had by standing up, not backing down. Hey, thanks for riding this crazy tale with me. It's proof you don't need badges to protect what's yours, just guts and good neighbors. Ever faced a bully hiding behind fake rules? Tell me below. I read every comment. Hit subscribe for more stories like this. Catch you next time. Stay bold.